What happens when a royal guest mistakes a comedy stage for a throne room? In just 38 seconds, one comment turned a lighthearted interview into the most explosive exit in late-night television history. Jimmy Kimmel had seen it all. Celebrities with attitudes, politicians who couldn't take a joke, musicians who showed up late. But nothing could have prepared him for what was about to unfold on this particular evening. The audience was buzzing with excitement as they waited for the next guest, someone who rarely made appearances on American talk shows. The production team had worked for months to secure this interview, and everyone from the writers to the cameramen knew this was going to be a big night. Jimmy stood behind the curtain, checking his notes one last time. His producers had briefed him on the talking points. Keep it light. Ask about the new book. Maybe throw in a couple of gentle jokes about royal life. Standard stuff. Nothing controversial. The goal was to make the guest feel comfortable, to show a different side that the public didn't usually get to see. The band started playing, and Jimmy walked out to thunderous applause. He waved to the crowd, cracked a quick joke about the traffic on Hollywood Boulevard, and then turned to face the camera with that signature smile. Our next guest needs no introduction, but I'm going to give him one anyway, Jimmy said, his voice warm and welcoming. He's a prince, an author, and apparently someone who's willing to sit down with me tonight. Please welcome Prince Harry. The audience erupted as Harry walked out from behind the curtain. He was wearing a dark suit, crisp white shirt, no tie. He waved to the crowd with a slight smile, the kind that didn't quite reach his eyes. Jimmy extended his hand for a handshake, and Harry took it, firm but brief. They both sat down, and the interview began. "Thank you for having me," Harry said, settling into the guest chair. "Thank you for being here," Jimmy replied. "I have to say, we're all very excited. It's not every day we get actual royalty on the show. Usually we just get people who act like royalty, and trust me, that's a very different thing." The audience laughed. Harry's smile remained polite, but distant. "So, let's jump right in," Jimmy continued. "You've written this book, and it's been making quite a splash. People are talking about it everywhere. What made you decide this was the right time to tell your story?" Harry shifted in his seat. "Well, Jimmy, I think when you've lived the life I've lived, when you've been through what I've been through, you reach a point where you need to set the record straight. People have been telling my story for years, and most of it has been wrong." "Sure, I can understand that," Jimmy nodded. "But you grew up in the public eye, right? I mean, that comes with the territory." "Does it?" Harry's tone had changed, just slightly. "Does being born into a certain family mean you surrender your right to privacy? Your right to be treated like a human being?" Jimmy sensed a shift in the energy, but pressed forward, keeping his tone light. "Well, no, of course not. But I think what people are curious about is, you've done a lot of interviews lately. You've written this very detailed book, and some folks are wondering if that's kind of the opposite of privacy." The audience made a collective sound, that knowing murmur that happens when someone says something a little spicy. Harry's jaw tightened. "I think you're missing the point," Harry said, leaning forward. "There's a difference between controlling your own narrative and having it controlled for you by tabloids and people who don't know anything about your life." "No, I get that," Jimmy said, his hands up in a placating gesture. "I totally get that. I'm just saying, as someone who also puts his life out there every night, there's a balance, right? You share some things, you keep some things private." "Are you comparing your job to my life?" Harry asked, and there was an edge to his voice now that made the audience go quiet. Jimmy paused. This wasn't going the way anyone had planned. No, that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just trying to understand the perspective. That's what we do here. We have conversations." "Conversations," Harry repeated, a bitter laugh escaping. "Is that what this is? Because it feels more like an interrogation." "Whoa, okay," Jimmy said, maintaining his composure. "I promise you, this is not an interrogation. These are actually pretty softball questions. I haven't even gotten to the fun stuff yet. I was going to ask you about living in California, the weather, maybe teach you some American slang. Softball questions, Harry said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. You Americans and your sports metaphors. Everything's a game to you, isn't it? The audience was completely silent now. This was not the playful banter they'd come to expect. Jimmy's producers were frantically talking into his earpiece, but he waved them off subtly. Look, I don't know what's going on right now, Jimmy said, his voice still calm but firmer. But I think maybe we got off on the wrong foot here. How about we start over? Let's talk about something else. You're a father now, right? How's that going? How's that going? Harry's eyes flashed. You want me to talk about my children on your show? So you can make jokes about them? So the audience can laugh? No one's laughing at your kids, Jimmy said quickly. I would never do that. I have kids too. I'm just trying to find some common ground here. Common ground, Harry scoffed. You think we have common ground? You sit here in your comfortable studio, making millions of dollars telling jokes, and you think you understand anything about what I've been through? Jimmy took a breath. The audience could feel the tension radiating from the stage. I never said I understood what you've been through. Your experiences are your own. But I do know that right now, you're being kind of rude to someone who's just trying to do his job and have a nice conversation with you. Rude? Harry stood up suddenly, his microphone pack nearly pulling out. You want to talk about rude? Let's talk about how your media treats people. Let's talk about how you all feed off of other people's pain like vultures. Okay, hold on, Jimmy said, standing up as well. First of all, I'm a comedian, not a journalist. Second, you came on this show voluntarily. Nobody forced you to be here. And third, you're talking to me like I personally did something to you. And I've been nothing but respectful since you walked out here. Respectful? Harry's voice was rising now. You've been mocking me since I sat down. Those little comments, those jokes. You think I don't hear them? You think I don't know what you're really saying? I made one joke about traffic, Jimmy said, his hands out in disbelief. One joke about traffic in LA. That's what set you off? It's not about the joke, Harry shot back. It's about the attitude. The presumption that you can say whatever you want about me, about my family, about my life. And I'm just supposed to sit here and smile and play along. That is literally what a talk show is, Jimmy said, and for the first time, there was frustration in his voice. Guests come on, we talk, we joke around, everybody has a good time. But you came out here with an attitude from the start. I tried to make this work. I really did. But you're determined to be offended by everything. The audience was watching this unfold like a tennis match, heads turning back and forth between the two men. You know what your problem is? Harry said, pointing at Jimmy. You people think that because you have a camera and an audience, you're entitled to everyone's time and everyone's story. You think you can just ask whatever you want, and we're supposed to answer. Well, I'm done answering. Then why did you agree to come on the show? Jimmy asked, his voice loud enough to project without yelling. Seriously, I want to know. If you hate this so much, if you think it's all so beneath you, why are you here? Because my publicist said it would be good for the book, Harry snapped, and immediately the audience gasped. It was the kind of honest, unfiltered moment that wasn't supposed to happen on television. Jimmy laughed, but it wasn't his usual warm laugh. It was the laugh of someone who'd finally heard the truth. There it is. That's the real answer. You're here to sell a book, not to have a conversation, not to connect with people, but to sell a book. And you know what? That's fine. That's totally fine. Most guests are here to promote something, but they don't come out here acting like I'm the villain for asking them about the thing they're promoting. You don't get to tell me how to act, Harry said. And you don't get to come on my show and treat me like garbage, Jimmy fired back. I've been doing this for years. I've interviewed presidents. I've interviewed actors, musicians, athletes, activists. Some of them I agreed with, some of them I didn't. But every single one of them understood that this is a conversation, not a lecture. You want to talk about respect? Show some. Harry's face was red now. I came here in good faith. No, you didn't, Jimmy said, shaking his head. You came here thinking you were going to control everything, that you'd say what you wanted to say, and I'd just nod along like some sort of prop. But that's not how this works. When you agree to be interviewed, you're agreeing to an actual exchange. Questions and answers. Back and forth. I don't have to answer questions that are designed to make me look bad, Harry said. I asked you about your book and your family, Jimmy said, exasperated. Those are literally the two things you talk about publicly all the time. How is that designed to make you look bad? It's the way you asked them, Harry insisted. The way I asked them was polite and interested, Jimmy countered. But you've decided that anything I say is an attack because that fits the narrative you've already written in your head. You walked out here ready for a fight. And when I didn't give you one, you created one anyway. The audience was completely locked in now. This had gone so far beyond a normal interview that nobody knew what was going to happen next. You know what? Harry said, reaching up to unhook his microphone. I don't need this. I don't need to sit here and be insulted by someone who makes a living off of cheap laughs. Nobody's insulting you, Jimmy said. But if you want to leave, that's your choice. The door's right there. Harry yanked the microphone pack off his belt, nearly throwing it onto the chair. This is exactly what I was talking about in my book. This attitude, this arrogance. You all think you're so much better than everyone else. I never said I was better than anyone, Jimmy said, his voice steady. But I'm also not going to stand here and let you talk down to me and my audience like we're beneath you. You're a guest in my house, and you're being a terrible guest. Your house? Harry laughed coldly. This is a television studio owned by a corporation. You don't own anything. It's my show, Jimmy said firmly. My name's on it, and I'm asking you to leave. The audience gasped again, louder this time. This was unprecedented. In all the years Jimmy had been hosting, he'd never kicked a guest off the show. Harry stared at him, seemingly shocked that someone had actually stood up to him. You're kicking me off? You were already leaving, Jimmy pointed out. You took off your mic. You said you don't need this. So yeah, I'm making it official. This interview is over. You can't do that, Harry said, though his voice had lost some of its conviction. I absolutely can do that, Jimmy said. And I am. Thank you for stopping by. But this clearly isn't working for either of us. Harry stood there for a moment, looking like he wanted to say something else, something cutting that would let him have the last word. But Jimmy had already turned to the audience, his back to the prince. We're going to take a quick break, Jimmy said to the camera, his voice remarkably composed. When we come back, we'll have some music for you. Stay with us. The director cut to commercial, and the studio fell into chaos. Producers rushed the stage. Security moved toward Harry, not threateningly, but ready to escort him out if needed. The audience was buzzing, everyone talking at once, phones out, already texting friends about what they'd just witnessed. Harry looked around, perhaps realizing for the first time that this wasn't going to play out the way he'd imagined. He'd expected Jimmy to back down, to apologize, to let him control the narrative. But instead, he was being removed from the show in front of a live audience, with cameras everywhere. This isn't over, Harry said, but his voice was quiet enough that only the people nearby could hear him. Yeah, it is, Jimmy said, not even turning around. He was talking to his producers now, figuring out how to fill the rest of the showtime. Security stepped in, politely but firmly guiding Harry toward the exit. He didn't resist, but he didn't go quietly either, muttering under his breath the whole way. The audience watched in stunned silence as the prince walked off the stage, through the corridor, and out of the studio. Jimmy stood there for a moment, collecting himself. His heart was racing, adrenaline pumping through his system. This was not how the night was supposed to go, but he'd made his choice, and he wasn't going to second guess it. There were some lines you didn't cross, and treating people with basic respect was one of them. When the commercial break ended, Jimmy addressed the audience directly. "So, that happened," he said, and the audience erupted in applause. "I want to apologize to all of you who came here tonight expecting a normal show. That was definitely not normal." The audience cheered louder, showing their support. "Look, I don't take any pleasure in what just happened," Jimmy continued. "I really did want to have a good conversation. But I also think that respect goes both ways. You can be a prince. You can be a movie star. You can be the most famous person in the world. But that doesn't give you the right to treat people badly." More applause. Jimmy could see people in the audience nodding, agreeing. "We work really hard on this show to make people feel welcome," he said. "Our guests, our audience, everyone who tunes in at home. And I think you all deserve better than what you saw tonight. So I'm sorry about that. But I'm not sorry for standing up for myself and for this team." The applause continued, building into a standing ovation. Jimmy felt a wave of relief wash over him. He'd made the right call. "Anyway," he said, smiling for real now, "we've got a great band coming up next, and they're going to play us out of this very weird evening. So stick around, take a breath, and let's remember why we're all here, to have a good time." As the band took the stage and started playing, Jimmy finally let himself relax. Backstage, his producers were already fielding calls from the network, from publicists, from journalists who'd heard what happened and wanted comments. Social media was exploding with clips and reactions. The video of the confrontation was already going viral, people taking sides, dissecting every word, every gesture. But in that moment, standing on his stage with his audience still cheering, Jimmy felt oddly at peace. He'd done what he thought was right. He'd stood his ground. And whatever happened next, at least he could say he'd been true to himself and to the values his show represented. The band played on, the music filling the studio, and slowly the energy in the room shifted from shocked to celebratory. The audience had witnessed something real, something unscripted and raw. And in an age of carefully managed public images and scripted reality, that meant something. Jimmy watched from the side of the stage as the band finished their song. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new controversies, new questions to answer. But tonight, he'd drawn a line. He'd shown that kindness and respect weren't optional, even for royalty, especially for royalty. And as the credits rolled and the audience filed out, still buzzing with excitement about what they'd seen, Jimmy knew that this night would be remembered. Not because a prince had walked off his show, but because sometimes standing up for basic decency was the most important thing you could do. The lights dimmed, the cameras stopped rolling, and another night of television came to an end. But the impact of those 38 seconds, of that one comment that sparked everything, would echo far beyond the studio walls. Because in that moment, Jimmy Kimmel had reminded everyone watching that fame doesn't excuse bad behavior, titles don't grant permission to be rude, and at the end of the day, we all have to answer for how we treat other people. The stage went dark, but the message remained clear. Respect is earned, not demanded, and no amount of privilege can change that